Shiloh Temple, you know, thing we went through last
The 19th. It's this Saturday, I think, right?
Does anyone know how the $800 million, where the $800 million is coming for PNC? Is that partially funded by Wake County? Yeah. Because if it is, I want them in here explaining why they can allow
affordable
She called me
housing,
the other day.
restaurants,
Yeah. Well, you know what?
another venue for 4,000.
Then how about $50 million in Zebulon?
Okay.
You know? That's a drop in the bucket if they're spending $800 million
Found the guardrails
PNC.
on the overhead, so. I said,
Oh, about 30
in the county already, once you get to
What is
on the other side, you just gotta get to it.
Yeah, that's it.
They're spending $800 million though.
Oh, okay.
They're starting out with a $200 million upgrade to Fan Experience.
Like that gambling they gonna have in it. Zebulon Board of Commissioners work session, August 17, 2023. Call this meeting to order. First, we need approval of the agenda.
Can I add a discussion of just a quick information about the lapsed salaries to the agenda?
Okay.
And then I make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Motion, do you have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Motion passes. Quarterly reports, fire.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to just provide an introduction about quarterly reports in general. These are an opportunity for the board and by extension the community to get a sense of operationally what we are doing, but more importantly and more relevantly for the board is to connect how your policy decisions, most specifically the budget ordinance that you adopt, how it connects to our service provision. So you'll hear in these quarterly reports some reactions to budgets that you've passed and how it is or it is not meeting service demands. You'll also hear some cues for consideration that will come back to you when we start talking to you more about the FY25 budget. So again, this is a lot of operational details, but it's meant to not only give you and the community an update, but connect to policies, most specifically your budget. And with that, I recognize Chief Perry.
Good evening. So we'll, as typically in quarterly reports with the fire department, I talked to you about how things are busier. And I wanted to take just a minute as we started off tonight, because spoiler alert, I'm going to tell you we're busier again. So I'll go ahead and give you the heads. Yeah, surprise, surprise. But I wanted to put that into context a little bit, because I think even when I use terms like that, it may be difficult to kind of put those in context. So we put together a little information for you. This looks at calendar year 2022 data, and this takes each of the municipalities in Wake County. And the total number of incidents that each department responded to, how many fire stations they have, and looking at their population. Again, this is a 2022 number, so obviously we're over the 10,000 mark, but this doesn't, so that we're comparing everybody apples to apples, so to speak, we'll use that number that was provided at the time this was compiled. And from that, we're able to provide an average calls per station. First, we'll look at that for just a second. Obviously, there are some fire stations that are busier than others, but just taking those metrics of the calls that a given municipality runs and how many fire stations they have, you'll notice beside Apex, Fuquay, Varina, Garner, and Knightdale a +1. That means they've each one have a fire station currently under construction that'll probably finish pretty soon. And when it does, you can see how that impacts. If you want to do the math, I've got those in parentheses. But I show that if you look, the highest that you see there is Fuquay Varina at 1900, Raleigh, again, isn't that very similar? But we're sitting at 2118. So you can take that one metric, and that just gives you, again, a lot of different factors go into that. But when you look at it strictly at those numbers, you get a feel for what busy looks like. To put it in a different perspective, we took that same call volume and we looked at the population of each of those as it stated in that same time period. And again, Garner now comes up as one of the higher ones at 209 calls per 1,000 people, while we sit at 230. So I give you just two different metrics, two different ways of looking at it, and I hope that gives you a little more insight that when we say we're busy, at least in these two metrics, that maybe that gives you a little bit more insight to look at. Why is business, why is call volume important? One, because that directly affects our staffing. It has impacts on our fleet, as our fleet are on the road more, just a lot of different components. Now, you may ask, why are we so much busier? Why is our calls per 1,000 busier than others? And there's a lot of reasons, and we've kind of talked about that. You know, having an interstate that runs right through our municipality, that's a big part of it. Some of our, if you will, some of those municipalities that are much more affluent, and we've already made reference tonight to the average incomes and this kind of thing. Some of those more affluent municipalities, maybe it's insurance, maybe it's medical things that they are provided. We run a lot of medical calls, a lot more than some of the others when you look at a per capita. And I think it gets into that's why we get into some of those higher call volumes than you see. But again, the answer is it's a lot of reasons, but it does relate in us being busy. So here's the slide that I kind of spoiled earlier. When you look at last quarter, and if you look beyond that, look at the whole year, our call volume continues to increase. We did dip just a hair last quarter, but that trend continues to increase and is on a pretty strong increase at that. So we're the busiest, and we're getting busier, something you very well knew.
Chris, when you say 539 total emergency incidents, does that also mean calls?
That's exactly what that means.
Okay, thank you.
Just because it's almost a matter of semantics, but a lot of people characterize them different ways, but you're right. Calls for probably the best way to describe it. Yes, sir.
Another quick question. When I think of a station, I think of a truck and a crew. Are most stations just a truck and a crew? For example, our station actually has 2 crews per shift.
That's right. It's a wide variety. For example, there's one station in Raleigh that has 3 crews in it. Almost all of the carry stations are all 2 crew stations. So it just depends on I think what you'll see is as call volume increases, then typically staffing increases. That doesn't necessarily mean you need additional stations. So for example, the station in downtown Raleigh has 3 crews in it because the downtown area of Raleigh is a heavy call volume. They don't necessarily need a fire station on every block. They just need more, for lack of a better term, manpower to answer those calls.
Do you have information, the data per crew versus per station? Does that exist or not?
It maybe we could probably get that kind of data. I don't have that data, but it may be something we could look at for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Call volume as it increases, and Commissioner Laut's question points at this. A big driver of crews and additional crews or concurrent calls. As calls come in while you're already on another call, that is an issue. You've heard me talk about that over and over again. My slide here just shows you that, unfortunately, that's not going down. As our call volume increases, so does our concurrent calls, and that trend continues. The good part of the story, and to connect it with what Joe was describing, as you recall, last year we went into a process to begin to increase our crew sizes, to split the 2 crews. This has been very, very successful for us. To me, I know different people would say you define smart growth. To me, this is an example of smart growth. The call volume has increased, the concurrent calls increased. We're growing to meet that. Will these 6 firefighters, will they be all we need for the next 10 years? Absolutely not, because our call volume will continue to increase. We provided for you several years ago kind of a projection. And as we look at that, that still seems to be holding true, the gradual increase of staffing as we continue to increase our call volume. So unfortunately, we've already had, since we did this, 2 times where our first crew was committed on an emergency scene and someone's house caught on fire and it was a working fire. So the good news is, as unfortunate as that is, we were able to put a crew of personnel on the scene without any delay. And that's exactly why we did it. And we have repeated that example, thank goodness, not in a structure fire way, but in medical calls and other calls over and over again, as both of these crews continue to function independently, and independently when needed, but jointly when needed as well. So that's been an initiative that you provided for that has been very, very effective. The thing that you see from me quite a bit also when it comes to quarterly reports is the response time analysis, and I want to just run through what we're looking like for this quarter. We always talk about call processing time, and when we talk about response time, that's the time from someone calling 911 until that vehicle pulls up in front of their home. So the call processing we don't have control over, but we still track it because it's part of that evolution, and 74% of those calls met that 2-minute goal of getting the information and getting that call processed. That's a little lower than what it was. Call volume and staffing within the 911 center are huge components to that. Looking at the things we do have control over, the turnout time, how quickly can our guys get in the truck and be on the road? It dipped last quarter as we finished up our renovation project, because sometimes the guys were having to come out of the other building, run to the main station. So we expected this to happen, but we also expect that to get back in the range where we were looking for. The one that we spend so much time on, and the one I'll call your attention to, is the travel time. What percentage of the time do we meet our 4-minute travel time goal? Our goal is 90%. We realize that there'll be some calls that we can't get there within 4 minutes, and that's why our goal is 90%. We were at 67%. Last quarter it was 67%. It hasn't been that long ago we were in the 70s. So what is that telling us? What is that travel time as it slowly, as our town is getting larger? And that is of no surprise to anybody. We're traveling further. When we travel, we had the discussion tonight, to those more remote areas. Sidney Creek is another example. We have not begun to run a lot of calls in Sidney Creek, but Sidney Creek will have an extended travel time when we run calls in that direction. So when you look at that, we were about 78%. So we track this as we look at call volume as a good indicator for staffing. Response time, or more specifically, travel time, is a good indicator for fire stations. Do we have enough fire stations? Are our fire stations in the right location? And we're seeing this number begin to go down, which honestly we expect that. That's why within your budget approved for this year, we'll begin discussions of at least land acquisition for fire station number 2, so we can again grow smart. Not build it too quickly, but at least acquire the land. So that's where all this kind of fits into the puzzle. I'll move on and kind of talk about some of the projects that have been ongoing. This is one that I haven't talked to you about in a while. I say that, we talked about it tonight, but in one of your formal meetings, I do want to talk about our fire station project. You may recall that we did the public engagement sessions. We got a lot of really good feedback from our public engagement sessions that were held here at Town Hall in January and February. I've got a bullet here, federal earmark grant due diligence. So let me update you on where we're at, and this is where the bulk of our work has been going. So our project team, and when I refer to that, I'm referring to our Wake County partners as well, last year identified a potential federal funding source obviously through the federal government. And we pursued that in attempts to secure some funding to help with our project. We found out months ago that we had been earmarked $7.5 million towards our fire station project. Great news, absolutely great news. And as Sheila so eloquently discussed related to the federal projects come with a lot of strings attached. So that's what we've been working on for the last few months, we being the project team, is what are the restrictions, what are the requirements, what are all the different pieces that may go in it. This $7.5 million has been allocated, although not yet obligated, for our project. That money is in the federal budget for us to receive, but we still got some things to do before we can, we're not writing any checks out of that account quite yet, if that kind of puts it in a different light. We've been looking at what it costs. There's things associated with this federal grant, and it's being administered by the USDA Rural Development. It's a Rural Development Community Project Fund grant, as how it is specified. And it does come with requirements, some of which relate to the selection of the architect. So we've had to back up and said, this is the architect we've got. We've been able to clear all the requirements related to that. We're looking at stuff, for example, and I want to make sure I get this right, but for example, the Build America, Buy America Act. Federal projects that such as this fall under it, we would have to make sure that a lot of the materials and stuff that are used in the construction of the building are built or developed within the United States, and it limits the ability to use materials from outside the United States. So we've been looking to see what impact does that have to our project. There's certain project management requirements that did not exist should we not have a federal grant. So we've been going through all of that and trying to wrap our hands around what does all that mean. Everything is going very well towards that. We are in the final stages of both the research and the approvals by the USDA. We hope to get within the next few months, hopefully, final approvals where we move from that allocated stage to the obligated stage, meaning the money is ours for the project. The next step you'll see is when we come to you saying, and I sure hope we come to you saying, our money has been approved and we need the board to formally accept this grant or deny it should you choose to do that. But that would be the next formal step, and that's where we're aiming for, to be able to come in here and say, the money's been obligated, all we've got to do is accept it, and we could go from there. I'll pause there because that's probably a whole lot to digest.
Now, when it comes to allocated and obligated, one of the things that drives me nuts about being on Campo is that sometimes they will tell a community, yeah, you got the money, and then they'll be like, you know what, actually, we're just gonna take that back. No, you don't have it. So when you talk about obligated, is that like a solid yeah, or that's a yeah unless they don't want to?
Yeah, my understanding is that becomes solid yes.
Okay, awesome.
As I understand it right now, we're in that yes, maybe stage. And that's why we need to, we still got some things that if we don't meet the requirements or the information we provide them is inconsistent with what they're looking for, they could say no.
Okay.
But our hope is within the next few months, maybe sooner, we'll move out of that and move to the start spending money phase.
Awesome.
Any other questions on the fire station project? A lot of work has gone into this federal earmark grant. That's how I characterized it. The due diligence, it's just a lot of moving pieces. We felt like it was really worth the time to dig into this and really know what we're getting involved with. Obviously, that's an amount of money that we really want to see as part of this project for sure. But it is something that should be investigated fully.
Now, if we do get awarded that money, that will in no way affect the percentage that Wake County is going to give us, correct? They've already agreed to that percentage, and that's, okay.
That is
all right,
correct.
Cool.
That is correct. Any other questions? Good, I'll move along. So when we last talked to you, we were working on a renovation project, something to allow our staff to have somewhere, for lack of a better term, to lay their heads down while we go through the process of constructing a new site. This is, the pictures that you see to the right are kind of after demolition. Construction did start early February. We moved back into the building in the end of May. It includes a new day room, 9 sleeping rooms now, and then the additional bathrooms and showers. That is a big part of our cancer reduction initiative. It has made a huge difference after coming back from a structure fire, and we can have 3 people showering and getting back in service compared to the 1 that we had before. That's what it looked like during the demolition phase. This is a looking down the hallway where the sleeping quarters are. Although a little bit difficult to the left, those are lockers where each staff person has a locker. That was not the case before. They would put stuff pretty much wherever they could, but they've got a designated locker now that gives you kind of an idea of what the little sleeping areas look like. And then that is the day room with the television in the middle, and then the different status screens that provides call information on both sides. So that gives you an idea. Project turned out really, really well, and everybody's really enjoying it. The other project update is our emergency operations plan. The emergency operations plan, we finished the first phase of it, which was getting that final draft written. We want to get it all done completely before we bring that draft to you for adoption, because we feel like as we go through this, we're in the phase now of finishing checklist development. We may see something that we need to either emphasize more, change, update. So let's get it all done, and then we'll bring it to you for adoption. Part of that will include staff training and a tabletop exercise. Our goal is to do that in the fall. But there's a lot goes into the emergency operations part. I really appreciate Commissioner Baxter bringing up the stuff about the high heat and the temperature stuff. That's exactly the kind of stuff that our emergency operations plan should look at to make sure that, especially when there are portions of our, we'll just call them emergency operations, that we share with the county. A lot of times stuff like shelters and reception centers, and in this case, the fact that the county did the temporary, the cooling areas, or I'm trying to remember the exact name.
Station.
Thank you. They set up at East Regional Center and at the library. There's no need to duplicate those resources, but where we can work together instead of eliminating duplication between the two. So in the case of those cool down stations, if you will, we're able to stay in contact with our emergency management counterparts with the county and monitor like capacity. Are they maxed out at what they're doing? Are they within capacity? And as we continue to work with them, they are well within their capacity and have additional capacity within the ERC and the public library for people that need a place to cool down. So it's very, I think it's very efficient to operate like that, where we can provide those different things in concert with the county. And we'll make sure we do even a better job of putting the word out to everybody. So any questions on that one? This, I mentioned to you that our EMS part is a big part of what we do. So I did want to take just a minute to tell you about a service delivery enhancement. We do run a lot of medical calls. We have just received approval to begin carrying CPAP, which enables us to aid those people who are having asthma attacks or difficulty breathing due to congestive heart failure or COPD or something like that. We can now provide them assisted breathing with a CPAP machine, and really improve their respiratory function even prior to the ambulance. So it probably doesn't seem like a whole lot.
That's awesome.
But it really is a great program. All of our staff have been trained, the equipment's been put on the trucks, and we're really, really excited about being able to provide that service delivery enhancement. And then I want to give you staff updates, and I typically wrap up my report each quarter with these, and I'll kind of wrap that up. I want to start off with firefighter Jeremy Hodge. We hired Jeremy in May as a trainee firefighter. Jeremy's going through his initial training. He's finished his EMT. He's now in the fire academy stage. We're hoping to get Jeremy on actually on shift in January of this coming year. But what I want to highlight about, and Jeremy's a super nice guy, and doing a great job. But I want to highlight the change in business associated with the way we did this. And this just goes in a lot of the stuff that we've talked about here, not just in the fire department, but in all the departments. And typically, I've kind of characterized this as expanding the recruitment process. Previously, a person with the right experience and the right qualifications could apply for a job with us in the fire department. But if they lack the experience or they lack the qualifications or certifications, we couldn't hire them. There was no mechanism to hire them. So when you look at people who said, I'd like to be a firefighter, if they didn't have the experience or the qualifications, Zebulon wasn't a place where they could begin a career. So our ability to hire and recruit was in a very, very small window, if that makes sense. Many people would get that experience from a fire department, whether it was ours or another one, but it's still, again, just a very small selection of people could come to the door with the experience and qualifications we needed to be able to hire them. A couple years ago, we started our junior firefighter program, and that gave people kind of a step into the fire department, but it also we're learning, it gives them a chance through our junior program to gain experience and begin working on those qualifications and certifications. A lot of the certifications that we require can be attained through high school programs, through community college programs. They don't necessarily have to be 21, 25 years old. So that has been very, very helpful. So that was, our program has begun to expand. It expanded from that narrow group to a little bit wider. And then we begged the question, what if somebody wanted to come in as a new employee, but they didn't have all the pieces? And that's where I highlight Jeremy. Jeremy's been our test case, our pilot case, if you will, to try to figure that out. Jeremy came into us as a junior firefighter. He had some of that experience. He had some of those qualifications, but he didn't have enough that where historically we would have considered him as a new employee. The pilot program that Jeremy's working with us basically sends that potential new employee, or that new employee through an academy situation where they receive the training and the experience that they need, and in turn we're able to recruit from a wider envelope, if you will, to hire employees. This opens up a lot of possibilities for us. This is common in Raleigh and Cary and larger departments because they'll hire 25 employees at the same time, so it's easy to put them all through a class. But in an environment such as ours, it's been more difficult, but we're really, really excited, and that's why I wanted to highlight Jeremy tonight. We're trying to figure out new ways to make it happen, and it really opens up our ability to recruit. Questions on that before I move on?
So do we fund that training? We're paying the municipality.
So our personnel policy already had a provision in it for trainee employees.
Mm-hmm.
They basically agreed to stay with us for a number of years following that.
Okay.
So, which is a really good. We help them get the training. They in turn agree to stay with us. In Jeremy's case, he already had established a relationship with us, so we were able to build upon that.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's an excellent program, because I know a lot of people they might want to become a firefighter, but can they give up their job to pay to go through training? For a lot of folks, that's not feasible, so I like that we're utilizing this. A lot of other communities are, and I'm looking forward to hearing wild success stories about all of the fabulous people we're able to.
Yeah, I think for me, I have full confidence that Jeremy's going to be 100% successful in the door. How do we roll this out in future recruitments? And I think the sky is the limit. We'll figure that out. But I'm excited about seeing how we make all this work.
Okay.
Then I want to talk about just some of our career development. We implemented a career development program, Career Ladder. You're familiar with those conversations, but I want to give you put some faces with some stuff that we talked about. This is what we wanted to do. I want to put some faces and some names with some of that so you can start kind of putting this together. What you see on this slide, this is all certifications that were acquired within the last 6 months. All these 4 gentlemen right here represent our leadership team the boots on the ground, so to speak. Captain Brown, Lieutenant Justin Lee, Lieutenant Zachary McLeod, Lieutenant John Winstead. Through our career ladder, we've incentivized them to become better at their trade, to learn more. You take, for example, Captain Brown has completed a Fire Officer 2 certification. That's like an advanced supervisor's class. Teaches him how to be a better manager, not only a personnel manager, but a tactical manager, how to guide crews, how to make strategic and tactical decisions. The other gentlemen as well, they're enhancing their abilities, which in turn just makes them better employees. I'm sure those three lieutenant individuals there, they aspire to be captains one day, and they're already getting training that will prepare them for that next position down the road. This next slide right here, now we're kind of looking at those seasoned firefighters. Again, these are all certifications that were attained within the last 6 months. But these are all individuals that have been with us for a number of years or have a number of years of experience as firefighters and came to us. But now, again, somewhat like their officer counterparts, they're learning new skills and learning how to be better with the skills that they have. For example, firefighter Greg Brantley has completed a technical rescuer, so he's gotten certifications that he didn't get in his initial training that provides him a technical expertise that not all of our employees have. You see that senior firefighter Jason Seago and firefighter J.D. Howard have both taken additional driver operator, how to be better at operating the apparatus. Senior firefighter Peyton Richardson, congratulations to him. He did many of the things that you've seen in previous slides, and he's met enough of those where he was able to be promoted to senior firefighter from a regular firefighter. So congratulations to him. But that's kind of the middle group, if you will. And then firefighter Brandon Turner, not to say not the last, but definitely not the least. He's one of our newest employees, newest as a career firefighter. But to give you some idea, he's taken some of those same driver classes that we've seen in some of the others, but the Fire and Life Safety Education Certification, which is a certification issued by the state, teaching him how to interact with kids and adults in presenting public education programs. Again, a great knowledge, but you get a feel for all these, if you will, rungs on the ladder, and how we encourage them to take these additional classes, and it prepares them for that next rung, if you will. So congratulations to each one of them who've been busy, very, very busy, getting additional classes and additional training as they prepare to learn more and do more within our organization. So with that, I'll answer any questions you may have.
Questions from the board, comments?
Doing a great job.
Very much.
Thank you. Next, quarterly report, Public Works.
Oh, we got the wrong name then. Will these return?
Good evening, ladies.
Y'all remember Mary Duffy?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here to talk about Public Works for the last quarter and year. And is it this one?
Yeah.
All right, so here's a look at some quick stats on our fiscal year 23 operations, and I'll give you some 5-year averages, put some of these numbers in context a little bit. So our 5-year average for yard waste is 10,400 cubic yards collected throughout the town. So we look like we're just slightly above that 5-year average. But May of 2019, we got hit with a tornado. And so our fiscal year 2019 cubic yard waste was 14,000 plus cubic yards of yard waste. And our fiscal year 2020, because we were still cleaning up from May through, most of 2019, that year we also hit over 10,000 cubic yards. Our 5-year average at that time was about 8,600. So our 5-year average now, counting those, is inflated. That said, last year we collected 10,400 cubic yards of yard waste, the exact same as our 5-year average. And so this is our new normal. It's just elevated, and it it's not as reflected in the average without accounting for that tornado. So it's kind of a weird trick of the numbers there. Our sweeping is kind of the same thing. The tons and the hours there represent actually a 7-month year because we sent the sweeper off for 5 months. So there was 5 months last year that our sweeper simply wasn't on our streets. Our 5-year averages are 164 tons, a good bit over the 99.3 we did. But if we extrapolated out that 7 months that we were sweeping to a full year, then we get to 170 tons, which is just slightly above the 5-year average. And we would actually be at 233 hours for the year if we hadn't had to take the sweeper down to do the rebuild on it. And compare that to an average of 187, we actually swept a lot in the 7 months that we were able to. We did a little over 1,000 work orders, and our average for the last 5 years is 700. So this is clearly well above what we had been doing historically. That is a number that we have seen ramp up just over time. As we're growing, the work orders are growing with it. There's no funniness in the numbers. It's just we're doing a ton of them. We have had Wayne on with us this year as the customer service advocate. That was a pilot program that y'all approved in January that continued on. Y'all have approved it in the current fiscal year. And he has enabled us to do so much more because he's out handling so many of these work orders instead of a crew handling it on their way to a job site or being pulled off of a job site to do something. And so that has been really fantastic, and you're probably seeing a little bit of increase in just our ability to get things done. Yes, ma'am.
Have you noticed, or have you been able to determine trending with the increased work orders? Are there certain types that you're seeing more of, or is it just all over?
Yes and no. I can tell you a big driver of that number is trash carts, new residences.
Okay.
And we have been making a push to, not we as in just the Public Works, but our vendor as well, to notice some people's trash carts are raggedy. And we feel very bad for them dragging something with no wheels to the curb because they don't know that they could just call us and we would get them a functional trash cart. And so we've had more of that too.
Okay.
But mostly what you're seeing reflected in that is an uptick in things like maintenance type requirements and also trash carts. And then the fuel number, I'll give you a year-to-year increase. We're up 12% year-to-year in gallons dispensed. We made a little change in how we report the one piece of the fuel metric, so I don't want to give a 5-year average because that's not an apples-to-apples comparison. But it is a 12% increase year-to-year, and that's probably a combination of the type of work, but also street miles to drive and number of vehicles and things like that. But I don't have any deep data into what's driving the fuel. All right. So the infrastructure growth that I just touched on, we added 6.25 miles of new streets. So that 20% year-to-year increase is in total street miles. We added 20% of our roadway miles again. So we are at 37 miles now. We added almost 5.5 miles of new stormwater pipe last year. That's a 24% increase for the town in stormwater pipe. So we're bringing our total up to 28 miles. That growth is going strong, and we are actually looking at about 3 miles worth of new roads coming before the board within the next 30 days. So for acceptance. So we may add half what we added all of last year in the first quarter. And as a reminder, every time we add a mile of street, we get all the stuff that goes with it, the houses, and our 4 S's of sidewalk, signs, sweeping, and stormwater. The conditions of our streets, however, are much improved.
I like the graphic.
The cars are not my analogy, but they are a great analogy when you're talking about streets because you're talking about something that was built to last but has to be maintained, and you're going to see how well or poorly you did that when you look at it every time. And our pavement condition rating is a score of how poor to fair to good to excellent the town streets are. And some of that improvement can be attributed to we're paving shiny new roads in the subdivisions, but the shift in the numbers and the improvement in the quantity and of poor quality streets is largely due to improvements that we're able to make due to the investments that the board has been making in recent years in the street paving program and our ability to go in and actually improve the quality of the older roads as well. So here's a look at the fiscal year 24 street paving, kind of shifting from past to present and future here. So we are getting close to inviting bidders, giving them notice that this job will be put out on the street. It'll be on the website and invitations sent out by the end of the month. We should have a within the next week. We should have a pre-bid meeting at the end of the month. The bid opening will be the middle of September with notice to proceed in mid-October and the substantial completion by mid-December when we have to stop paving because it gets cold. In addition to resurfacing, we're also doing pavement preservation on the streets you see there in fiscal year 24. Pavement preservation refers to a wide variety of other techniques that can be used to extend the useful life of the roads that you have. This year, what we're going to be doing is crack sealing, which is when you use a hot or rubberized seal to fill cracks on the pavement surface. This extends the pavement's life by preventing water infiltration into the subbase and preventing the freeze-thaw effect that breaks the pavement up. So the numbers I've read, you get about 3 to 4 more years out of it, which may not sound like a lot, but that's a 20% of the useful life of a roadway. So it's not pretty, but it's effective. And it is something that allows you to make more of the roads that you have because it is considerably less expensive than resurfacing the full mill and pave of those same roadways. Talk a little bit about our stormwater audit again. As we talked about, we did receive a notice of deficiency a year ago, which is not notice of compliance, but it is also not notice of violation, and we'll take it and run. And the last parts of that process were completed at the end of the fiscal year. And that is where we do a self-audit. There are, I think, 6 different or 8 different categories across which they check you, and they do half, and then they tell you to audit yourself on half. We've completed that half. We've also updated our stormwater management plan, which is part of the audit process. And so both of those have been submitted to the Department of Environmental Quality at the end of June, or in June, at the end of the year. The town engineer is, as Lisa was speaking to earlier, the hiring is underway. The goal to have that person on board and operating by the end of the year. At that point, we will start transitioning the stormwater management program to the engineer. Public Works will maintain infrastructure, will clean, inspect, repair, that sort of thing. But the engineer will take over management of the broader program, education and enforcement, engagement, there's a whole list. This person and the program are going to need continued support in order to pass the next audit and, frankly, in order to keep our water clean. The audit, it's not a picture of how we're doing in year 5 or by the time we get to 2027. They are going to look at how we did in year 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And so we have to make sure we don't save that work for the end, and we don't save those investments for the end. They will also get harder. Larger cities are under more scrutiny, geographically and by population, and we're growing in both. And the longer you're in a program, the more they expect you to have done with that program. And so our audit this time, I feel like we squeaked through. They're going to want even more next time. Couple of Updates on some of our bigger projects. Green Pace and Arundel Signals, construction is underway. We're working our way through the utility relocations. I believe there was even a meeting about that today. And so that is moving along. The project should be completed by the end of the year. And as a reminder, we're putting in dedicated turn lanes on Arundel as well as a stoplight there. Shepherd School in Old Bun, design is essentially done. The only thing it's waiting on is for right-of-way and permits and things like that to be done so that the plans can be finalized and sealed and submitted to DOT. We have all of the right-of-way essentially in hand with the exception of the Boys and Girls Club property. We are in negotiations with them at this time and hope to move that forward here shortly. Once that's in hand, we can get our erosion control permits finalized. We can get final plan approval from DOT. The utility relocation agreement with Duke needs to be done to move that three-phase power through there. The other utilities would be moved as part of construction. So we'll do the utility coordination and relocation concurrent with the construction bidding process. And each of those takes about 90 days. Once we get through that, we're at about 9 months for construction.
So what are we looking at in total, are you thinking, before the first blinking light happens?
That's a very good question. That can get tricky. Right-of-way can take a little bit of time, DOT certification. I would probably say we're looking at next year, but.
There's a lot, I would like to get further in the process before we throw out a date. There's just a lot of moving parts right now.
We're going to get questions about this now that we've been talking about it. So if we say 18 months, would that be considered conservative or would that be considered aggressive?
We want to evaluate this further before we start communicating with you or the board. If we put a number out there to you, and by extension the community, we want to be able to stand behind it. So give us some time to evaluate where we are and what the next steps are.
Okay.
One quick question also for me. Is there anything specific that's holding up the Boys and Girls Club?
We met with them in the spring and provided them some information and some things that they requested. And my understanding is that they have a board which had to meet, and they have an attorney that's helping, that works with them and does a lot of work with them, that's representing them. And so I think a lot of the delay has been communication delays and communication time.
All right, thank you.
Okay. And a quick update on the swimming pool demolition, because it's probably going to be done by the time we get back in front of you again on quarterly reports and updates. But the bids are in, they're under budget. It has been awarded to Four Seasons Demolition. We're working through the contracting stuff before we get into the pre-construction meeting and such. But basically, while we're giving them 4 months to do it, they want to be in and out in 1.
Wow.
That was from them.
We'll take it.
I'm not complaining.
So that's consisting of basically removing all the debris and filling it in and everything like that? For this,
Yes,
month's
from what
timeframe?
I understand, it is a complete removal and backfill
In a
job.
month,
They
in a
are
month.
not collapsing it in.
All right, thank you.
And that is all of the updates I have at this time. Do you have any questions for me?
Now, back to the pool, that's not including the parking lot, is it?
Excuse me?
The parking lot, just the pool.
Is it?
Okay,
as well.
yeah, that's what I thought.
What will go in place, just kind of leave it out dirt? It's going to be dirt and Chris left there?
That was the plan, I think.
Grass.
Grass? All right, thank you.
Are we going to be selling through state surplus some of those?
I have not
Pieces of
looked
equipment?
at the condition up close.
I think all that stuff, I was out there searching the other day, all that stuff is gone, I think. It's
But
already.
Yeah, some of it has been removed, and we have turned it all over to the contractor to do what was in his best interest. We had no desire to mess with it, take it apart, handle it, 'cause some of it's so big. So we turned it over to the contractor, and if he gets salvage value, that helped him get his price a little lower, so that's where we're going
At
with it.
12 cents for each one of those, I think that probably I'm happy with that. Thank you so very much, Mary.
Next, Governing Board Procedure Manual.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'll see if I can't navigate the board through this pretty quickly. Just as a recap, the purpose of procedure manuals for towns that you used to be, which was around 4,000 people, the board and the population that they served was pretty static. You will find communities that are quickly growing, much like yours, to establish board procedure manuals just so they have something written down on when to do things, example like how to adopt agendas, how to add to agendas. This specific purpose, and the reason for this, and I'm really pulling this from the School of Government's publication, is you establish rules of procedure because they're intended to help boards reach informed decisions effectively, efficiently, orderly, courteously, and fairly. This section of the remote procedures, or I'm sorry, of the board procedures manual has to do with remote meetings. The board expressed an interest in this. Your town attorney, Sam Slater, came before you at your work session in April, and some of the feedback that you provided to him, and he's available to provide color commentary as well, is that you wanted to have a clarification and some distinctions on absences. So one that was originally put for you was really, as you all qualified, a planned absence. If you knew that you were going to have a conflict and you couldn't be there, one of the feedbacks that you provided to Sam and to us by extension was that you wanted to have an additional category for emergency absences. Like something came up, no one could have planned this, but I can't be at the meeting. So the procedure that's in front of you adds the planned absence as well as the emergency absence. And then the other distinction that's before you is you relayed to Sam that if a participant gets disconnected, to extend the time for that participant to reconnect. So what we're really looking for is, before we bring this back before you for adoption, is do you have anything in addition, or do we need any kind of clarification to this draft? I want to point out something to you that it won't be, you can still adopt a policy, but I want to draw your attention to the staff report. And if you look at the financial analysis, and I'll read this just to emphasize the point, the staff report says the financial impact of adding a remote meeting section to the governing board rules of procedure is either inconsequential or uncertain. Two very different things. So when we tell you inconsequential, when you adopt this policy, we can really go the cheap route, which is stick a phone next to a microphone, and it's really cheap, okay? If you want to have something like a Zoom participation using this room, we have to bring in a lot of technology. You're talking around the $10,000 range. So that's why I put inconsequential, because if you get really low tech, you can do it very cheaply. If you want to have more like video presence, then it's going to be higher end. Again, you don't need to make that decision when adopting a policy, but I wanted to draw that distinction that this could have a very wide range of financial impact depending upon what level of participation you want. A lot of talking on my part. I'll be quiet. Again, do you all have any additions or clarifications, or do you have any questions of Sam?
Commissioner Baxter?
So I know that we had, Attorney Sam Slater and I had talked just a little bit after the last meeting when we lost transmission, and it took a while for it to come back up. And this policy kind of covers what happened, what's a reasonable amount of time for a commissioner to log back in. And I just want to point out that we're not really adopting anything that says if it is the town's issue and what the requirements would be for the commissioner to log back in to participate. Did I capture that correctly, Sam?
Sure, and the 3 minutes, nobody's starting a timer. We've been in meetings, right, where these disconnections have happened, and it's kind of, it'll be the mayor's call and intuitive, and the addition to 3 minutes doesn't distinguish between the cause of disconnection. It's any disconnection as it's written, a reasonable amount of time, up to 3 minutes. I mean, you could say a reasonable amount of time, up to 10 minutes. It doesn't mean you actually wait 10 minutes. It's, because if it's someone in the room will know what's going on and the mayor can really make the call. That's the cadence of how those sort of disconnection incidents work. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Just to clarify, Joe, with the phone to the microphone or whatever, what is going to determine that? That's going to be up on the board to decide which level we want to go to, or
Yeah,
what is
so-
that going to be?
So what I will do is when this comes back to you, I'll have that financial impact quantified. And so that will be a part of this staff report. And so I'll give you the latitude. I'll say, excuse my language, but the cheap route is going to cost you this. The video conferencing will cost you this. If you go for the higher end, we'll also attach a budget adjustment to this. We'll either through savings of rollover or draw from fund balance. So depending upon the route that you'll go, it won't change the policy, but you may need to adopt a budget adjustment as well.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you. Next is strategic plan grant.
Okay, so the board has had a policy on how they award grants to nonprofits. It goes back to 2007. That policy stipulated some of the conditions on how they would award grants, but it also stipulated not only award amounts, but the total budget. So that 2007 policy, it lays out that no more than $5,000 will be available in this category and no greater than $1,000 per award. In 2020, that policy was revised to reflect that a strategic plan had been adopted to further distinguish some of the conditions that a nonprofit would have to meet in order to get the award. A specific example being, was that nonprofit going to do something related to a goal that the board had adopted in one of the focus areas like growing smart, vibrant downtown, or small town life? The dollar amounts that were part of the 2007 policy did not change. It was just more the conditions. The one that's before you now reflects changes to the North Carolina General Statute, which specifically prohibits award of grants from if a board member is associated with that nonprofit in any way. And so in order to be consistent with the general statutes, this policy reflects that language that in effect says no award can be awarded to a nonprofit if a board member is associated with that nonprofit. The general statute does allow a board member to recuse themselves from the vote, and so the language within the policy calls that out. And again, similar to the remote meetings, what we're looking for is any questions or comments or additions or clarifications before we bring this back to you for a formal vote.
Any questions, comments from the board?
What is that amount, Joe, that we currently, I think it used to be 5,000 that we were giving the nonprofits, is that correct?
Yeah, the dollar amount has not changed from what was originally put down in 2007, which says the budget line item will never be more than 5,000, and no individual award to any nonprofit will be more than 1,000. That was this policy that's before you does not change what was originally adopted by the board in 2007.
Sounds like something we need to revisit, and a policy we need to revisit possibly?
How much?
Correct, and we have a lot
At
more.
some point, I think it probably would be good, but for right now, we just, I think, need to figure out if this verbiage is what we need it to be. But I think I mean, when we talk about the strategic plan, yeah, do we want to increase that? Do we want to give more to 501c3s? I don't know. Be worth a talk. So what I haven't seen, and maybe I just didn't catch it, was an explanation of what an association would be considered. Because if I deliver once a month, let's say for Meals on Wheels, is that me being associated with the Meals on Wheels program? Or is it more like I'm on the board of Little Miss Pumpkin Time or whatever? Like what exactly defines the association, just so that we have some clarity?
Yeah, that's probably a good question for your attorney. The word association was lifted exactly from the general statute, and the general statute does not give a definition. So my recommendation is, on a case-by-case basis, you would want to consult with your attorney.
It does define it, yeah, and it's in your packet, yeah.
Where is it? What page?
D1, nonprofit, you know, the ban is no public official shall knowingly participate in making.
Where's D1?
It's this last page in the statute itself. Do you see it, 14, 2,
I'm
3,
so
4,
sorry, I
3?
didn't look past, I thought that this was the end.
The
right
copy
here.
there? Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, do you see it? So then section D1,
Okay.
I'll cut to the chase.
Yeah,
It is being a director, officer, or governing board member.
okay. So
what it
it's a
is.
much higher level association
It's
than
not,
just,
it's not being a fan or supporting it, just broadly.
okay, well, that's
Yeah.
excellent to have that defined, thank you.
I have a question that's somewhat hypothetical along the lines of revenue sharing. For example, what if a nonprofit wanted to help us do Rock the Block and in fact charge a fee for other vendors and actually create a revenue stream? Because a lot of events can pay for themselves if they're properly done, especially on a grander scale. Is there a way that we can either share the revenue with them or turn the revenue over? Because we let them sell rental-wise a vending spot on a public street.
Are you saying that we've funded them in some way, and then they've made money and we're asking for a reimbursement?
I'm talking more revenue sharing.
But they've received a grant.
They could have received a grant, or they want to take over an event, charge a fee when they're using public property. Because I know this goes on in a lot of towns where a nonprofit runs some of these events, and there is a huge amount of revenue, and whether or not we could share revenue with them or even let them have the revenue. Because as we grow, we can't do everything ourselves. A lot of this is going to have to be taken over by a nonprofit.
Right, I think that's,
Can I try? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm
Larry.
batting a zero on this. So
Yeah,
I mean, I'm
rescue me.
talking more revenue sharing than I
Yeah.
am grants.
Well, this is, I mean, it's contracts benefiting nonprofits, okay? So maybe there's revenue sharing, but if there's a benefit conferred from the town to that nonprofit, that's how I look at it. You know, if the nonprofit, I'm not sure about the revenue sharing, right? If the nonprofit is cash flow all to the town somehow, I don't know how that would happen. Maybe that's not a concern, but it's probably not all that way. There probably is some benefit that the town is conferring on that nonprofit. And if that's the case, then if you all are officers, directors, or board members, you can't be a part of that under this statute. And I was going to add too, it's if you look at part 2 there, D2, it includes deliberating or voting, attempting to influence any other person who's deliberating or voting. So it's pretty broad. It's not like you can just say, I'll recuse yourself, but sit in the meeting. Like I would lead the meeting for the discussion of anything that you're personally involved in, any boards that you are personally involved in that stand to benefit from anything the town is doing. You should remove yourself from that completely.
Are you talking physically remove yourself or just not
I would
participate in the
physically
conversation?
I would physically remove yourself because the direction in part 2 there is very broad in terms of what you're not allowed to do in that decision-making process.
Larry, can I ask for a bit of clarification, trying to understand what your question was? And I'm going to use a hypothetical because sometimes that's how we talk.
Yeah, let's say Zebulon wants to copy what Carrie does and decides to have a lazy day.
Right.
And the nonprofit says, we would like to do this. We want you to close all the streets. and then the nonprofit is going to go ahead and rent out all those booths for the day, and maybe even provide the tent, for example.
So
but
would it be
they're
a
gonna charge
donation in
fee.
kind then? Because the town is letting them close the streets?
Well, the town would have to close the streets. They would have to ask the town to do it. But if they in turn wanted to go out and get all the vendors and charge a fee to have your booth on the closed streets and generate revenue,
I'm assuming that we could just approve that and say we get $2 of every ticket sale or something, right? Or booth rental.
But Larry, in that scenario, are you on the board of some nonprofit? I mean, is that your?
well, no,
in that
none of us
hypothetical?
could be on the board.
Yes, then that's
Right.
not, that's the concern. You can do what you're talking about. This is, this speaks to conflicts of interest and self-benefiting your preferred nonprofit.
As long as no one on the board is involved with the nonprofit, we're fine.
That's right. Like your hypothetical would be, it's Lazy Days and the lead sponsor of Lazy Days is the chamber.
The
and-
civic organization, the
Yeah, and
chamber.
you're on the board of the chamber, you know, and you're gonna cut a deal on the rental fees or something. That would be an award of money in the form of a grant, loan, or other appropriation. And so the town could do that, but the chamber member shouldn't participate or speak to others or have any part of the decision to do that.
I just want to make sure we have a clean avenue for nonprofits or civic organizations to run these things and actually make money. So it becomes kind of a fundraising event for them, and they do a lot of the work.
Would that, wouldn't that sort of be a different policy though? That
Yeah.
wouldn't fall under
Yeah,
this.
that
It
would not
be
apply
totally
under
different.
us giving
Right.
them money to
That's
do
right.
something, so to speak.
As far as the resolution that we're talking about for the non-funding, I don't have any issues with it. I think that it's well put together and it will allow us to kind of get back to funding nonprofits again, which we kind of took a little vacation from. And I know that certainly, you know, it has served the town well to be able to fund some of the nonprofits that do good work in our community.
I want to comment on, I just want to clarify something Commissioner Lauk said, because Commissioner Clark brought up something. Operationally, the way this would work, if you were to enter into something like Commissioner Lauk's hypothetically said, we would lay out in a contract, something that says this is what you get in exchange for the grant. So we would spell all that out. That's not something that can fit neatly in a policy, but this is really the funding mechanism and what you can and cannot do as far as being a voting member in approving that funding. But as far as the details of the arrangement, we could work that out in a contract.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you. Next, Commissioner Baxter, you wanted to add on lap salary?
Yeah, I just wasn't sure if we had any idea about how we're looking for lapsed salaries yet, or is that something that's going to come back before us on the 24th?
So let me say, all right, so let me talk about lapsed salaries from last fiscal year, and let me talk about lapsed salaries for the current fiscal year. Your best determination of how much lapsed salaries is available to you as a result of last fiscal year is going to be reported to you in the audit. And you'll get a sense of, so as an example, if we said we were going to hire someone by a certain date, but we hired them later, that lapsed salary rolls into your fund balance. And so you'll get a sense of how much the fund balance increased from last fiscal year by how much rolled in. As far as the current fiscal year, the best that we can share with you is, just like Lisa presented tonight, not all of the positions that we requested of you were funded full year. Several of those positions, town engineer being, well, not town, clerk being an example, assistant town manager being an example, those were funded for later in the fiscal year.
Right.
Now, if we go beyond that, by doing our human resources update, we can give you a sense of what lap salaries we're encountering in the current fiscal year. So there's two ways to look at it. Last fiscal year, did we have lap salaries? Yes. That would have rolled into your fund balance. You'll get a sense of how much fund balance you've got to work with when you get the audit. In the current fiscal year, you'll get a sense as we report out to you on the hiring of positions.
Okay, and so when we receive the audit, we're going to know how much we had in lapsed salaries. I mean, I'm assuming that that is going to be a determined number, not
No.
just get a sense of. I mean,
No,
like, I'd
you're
like
not-
to know what the number is, because I mean, if a job was open and it wasn't filled, then we know exactly how much we designated, and that has a number associated with it, right?
Yeah, the audit's not going to reveal that level of detail to you. The audit's going to reveal to you how much the fund balance grew. Fund balance can grow in a lot of ways other than lap salaries. What I would like to know is get a sense of what is it that you're looking for with lap salaries? Is it just you want to get a sense of accounting that we're staying on top of it, or do you want just a sense of available funding? Because that's a very intricate and probably flawed analysis. But if I could get a sense of where y'all are coming from, I could probably give you a better way to approach it.
Well-
Sounds like you got the question.
Yeah, I just did some scribbling over here real quick, because I used to keep up with this all the time. We have 15 vacant positions right now, and I just threw $6,000 a month at a position, and 6 times 15 is $80,000 a month in lapse. However, Joe brings up a key point. Not all of those 15 positions are funded for 12 months. They've already jump-started recruiting on positions that aren't funded until January, because you wouldn't hire till January. So I'll drop a quick little matrix that I think we could use as part of the HR report that would show you whether or not you're lapsing anything. Because a lot of times you're not, because we started recruiting knowing the position's not funded until January, so we're not going to hire it till January. So I'll do a little matrix and have it at the retreat, show you, because I can look at the budget real quick and plug some numbers in there and show you how quick it is to do.
Well, that would be wonderful, and so thank you for offering to do that. I think, though, what we were looking for and what we were kind of led to believe that we were going to have was an idea of how much lapsed salaries had rolled into general fund that hadn't been accounted for, that we could use towards funding other positions or other projects. And I mean, like, that's something that I can go back and look at the video, but I feel like I'm remembering you said that once you came back before us with lapsed salaries, we would have an idea of what else we could, like, have the potential to fund, what other positions we could fund. And like, that's the number and the information that I'm looking for, because quite frankly, I feel like Public Works needs more support. And if we have the lapsed salary to be able to fund a position even for part of a year and then roll that into next year's budget to continue on, that would be super helpful to have that information. I know that it might be a little bit tricky, but to me, it's like and this is how I see it, and if I'm seeing it wrong, please educate me so I can understand better. We've set aside $10,000 for a position that those funds lapsed. In my mind, that means that we have $10,000.
I think this little matrix will help you look at it, because I have dug into the ledgers, and if you have a vacant position and you still have work to do, a lot of times that money gets spent in overtime using your current employees.
Correct.
Other times, like IT right now, while there
having
may
to
be some
contract
lapse
out.
IT money, we're paying a contractor to do the work. So sometimes the nickel just moves from one spot to the other. It appears there's a nickel, but it's being spent somewhere else.
Well, I'd just like to know what nickels we have left and where the other nickels have gone, I guess. I mean, like, I feel like it's important for us to have a handle on the ins and outs of taxpayer money. And so,
I'll have this matrix sheet for you at the retreat, so we can use that as a starting point with the understanding that that money may be spent somewhere else to get the job done.
yeah, no, I don't disagree, and I don't not understand that portion of it. But certainly I feel like there have been times where there is lapsed salary that could be directed elsewhere. So, I mean, or maybe not, but I'd still like to see the numbers so I have an understanding.
So am I to take it that you're more so just looking for the accountability of those funds where they're, over time frame?
Well, yeah, the checks and the balances,
Gotcha.
like we used $1,000 over here. We decided we were buying paper clips over there, and then all of a sudden the $10,000 is gone that we were originally talking about. And that's okay, but if there's funding out there and there's lapsed salary that we could combine and do something meaningful with, I want to be able to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And that's really all I wanted to talk about as far as that goes, unless anyone else has some thoughts.
Well, I think Commissioner Lauk's spreadsheet will help, and it will start a conversation. I do want to clarify something, because I do not want you all to think that I'm misleading you. So when I talked about lapsed salaries will allow you to be able to use it for other things. Lapsed salaries is really, no, it's not really, it is a one-time expense.
Correct.
And so you can use it for other things, but I'm going to recommend that you don't use it to an ongoing expense, that you use it to a one-time expense. So lapsed salaries, if you take lapsed salaries and you apply it to a position, you really need the funding for the position, because that position will then run out of money. So to clarify what you may have heard from me, you can use it for other things, but I'm going to recommend that if you do get extra money, it go to a fixed cost thing, like a capital expense or a program.
I don't disagree, but also, like, let's just, again, hypothetical, we have decided that in the next fiscal year, we are adding a position, but we would like to be able to add that position sooner. And the lapsed salary could bridge the gap so that by the time we reach the next fiscal year where it's going to be funded anyway, we've just been able to bring that person on board ahead of time.
And I will, as your manager, I will do that. So as an example, there are positions in Public Works, there's positions in police. I think there's going to be a need for positions in fire, maybe even mid-year. As those needs become available, I'm not going to necessarily wait for the end of the fiscal year to include it in a budget. I'm going to come before you, and I'm going to recognize ways that we can fund it. And if lap salaries is a way to get us to hire a person mid-year, and then we can figure out how to fund them full-time the next budget year, I'll bring that to your attention. But again, I think Commissioner Laux has brought up a valuable tool that I think will help at least start the conversation.
Any other questions, comments from the board? Well, it's been wonderful, but I think it's time for a motion to
I
adjourn.
make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Motion